Seems legit.
Happy New Year, Legitimates! Welcome back to my channel in 2024. Today we are starting with a pattern and we are making the utility belt. I did do this in a live a long time ago. I have since written it into a pattern, had my testers read it over. This is amazing. So this one is for me. This is going to be my gardening belt because I just love horror. These are the fabrics out of the horror box from the Ghana Sewing Room. But it's fairly quick, as you can see by the size of the video, and super handy for more than just gardening. Anything really, just to carry stuff around. You could use it for teacher pouches or craft or gardening or whatever. So let's go. Right, so let's get started. I've got all the pieces I need here. We can actually start with the belt if you want to. Now, it doesn't necessarily matter which way you want it connected, but I personally like to have the extension part on this side, but it actually doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is, normally you would go up, down and out, but I want my join to be underneath. So I'm going to go on the outside part first and then to the inside part. Now that's too much. I don't want that much excess. Like about that much. And then with right sides up, I'm going to come over next to the hardware first because that's always the hardest bit to stitch. I'm going to stitch, back stitch, come all the way down, needle down, and then pivot to do my X. Now if the hardware gets in the way, you might have to go the opposite direction than the way you want to. And then I'm going to go needle down, pivot, across the bottom, and then diagonally back up to the top. Making sure that you are being careful of your hardware bit, because it is big and chunky. Pop those in the bin. So now from the outside you've got the X, but the other bit's on the outside. And so then we just go up and out the opposite way, so closest hole and then furthest, so that the tail's on the outside. That bit's done, so we can set it aside. These are my pockets, so I'm going to take one of these pockets and my little square pocket. Now I want the stripes going opposite ways. I don't like it where its stripes are the same, so I'm going to do it this way, but you can do it any way you want. And I'm going to take my binding. Now I always find it easier if I put a crease in it first before I try and put it around the stuff. It's not a big crease, I'm just using my fingertips a little bit to crease it in half. But I do find that this is much easier to put around things if we do it this way. So, take my pocket. Now I want to start here in this corner, go up, across and down so it's one piece. So I'm going to put it in the fold. And I'm going to clip it in place. I possibly should have done this in black and not red, but whatever. Now when we get to the corner, I'm going to pinch it all the way to the end, like this, and then I'm going to open this out and flatten it down, and then push those two fold bits over to create kind of a right angle in the corner so that we can continue up the other side. Now use as many, you can use clips on this if you're not making it in vinyl. So again, we're going to pinch it at the end, open it out, flatten it against the fabric, and then pinch. That is how I get my corners done so quickly. So I'm going to stitch, back stitch. We always back stitch to lock it in. And then I'm going to come up to the corner. And then as soon as I've got one stitch in this side part, we're going to turn. I'm going to move the clips out of my way. So we're going to go down, one needle stitch in, turn, and then down this side, and then we're going to back stitch at the end. Trim the tails, trim off the excess binding, pop that there, trim off the start tails, and we have our little pocket. So now I need to, on the right side, so when we fold this over, half of it will be upside down, which doesn't really matter, but We want it right sides up, and then at the bottom, we're going to fold it over and clip it in the center. And then we're going to do the same to this. We're going to fold it in half and clip it in the center. And then it's just a matter of lining those two center points up and clipping them together like so. Now I'm going to start here. We're going to go down, across, and up, and that way I can do it all in one continuous thing and have less tails to chop off. Needle down, pivot across the bottom. I also like sealing the bottom of things. Up the other side. Back stitch. I like to back stitch twice. It'll just make it a little bit more stable, especially if I'm going to like rip that open a lot. I want to take off this tail as well. And the back one. So now that one's attached. We're going to put this right sides together and just stitch the two edges. You can clip it if you want to. I don't feel the need because I've made many of these. So we're going to stitch and back stitch. If you didn't want to have the inside of the pocket upside down, you could cut these as two separate pieces. Just add a seam allowance to both pieces to make them the same size. Because I like chain stitching, I'm going to grab the second pocket and put it right sides together. And then we're going to stitch down that edge as well. So we're going to stitch and back stitch. Go all the way down. Back stitch at that end. Chop that one off. I'm going to cut off the tails while I'm here. And then I always like to start opening first. It's just a habit I've gotten into. And then back stitch, and then cut this one off, flip it over, line up the bottom, and back stitch. Open those out, cut them off, and then we're just going to, actually before I turn this, I just want to trim off a little bit of the seam in this corner to make it look nicer. It's not an absolute necessity, but you'll get more pointy corners and less curved corners. Just that little bit. It does make a difference. So I'm going to stick my finger into the corner and then grab it and push it out. Same with this one. So I'm grabbing it like this and then pushing like that. Now, depending on the fabric you're using, you can iron these. I'm usually using waterproof canvas for all the ones I've made, and I don't iron them. That doesn't mean to say that you can't. I just don't. So this is the back of the pocket, and this is the front. So it's just got all the words here on this one. And this one's also got some of the creepy guys. So the first thing I want to do is on this one, though it's got the pocket, we're going to top stitch along the top edge. Stitch, back stitch. You only want to do 2 or 3 stitches. And then top stitch across the top like so. Trim the tails off, throw them in the bin. I'm going to run out of bobbin thread soon, and that's okay. And then I'm just going to roll this and finger press it. With waterproof canvas, generally finger pressing works fine. It's not a perfect rule, but it's a pretty solid one. You can usually, with waterproof canvas, finger press it, except for the stuff that you get in the furnishing section of Spotlight. It's so flexible that the crease won't help. You need to iron that. It also frays a lot, so just random tip, if you are using the waterproof canvas from Spotlight, cut it with a soldering iron on a piece of glass. It will seal the edge so there's no fraying, and using the glass means it won't stick to your cutting board. I'm going to do that as a video, I think. Alright, so I finger pressed those. Now we need our ruler and an erasable marker of some description. I'm thinking Chaco pen because it is such a dark fabric. If this was a lighter fabric, I would use my erasable friction pens. You can get these from supermarkets and Officeworks and just everywhere. So, I am going to measure and measure. Once it's lined up straight, of course. And then the same with this one. So the measurements that I'm doing here are the same on both. For the edges. But this one, we also need to find, wait, it's running away. Find the center. I'm going to just clip it because it's just the easiest way. Alright, find the center, draw a line, and then draw a line each side of the center line. Now the center line is purely for show so that I can line things up. Now there's two ways to make this. In my pattern, I will stitch these, fold them over so that the top is sealed shut, but then it blooms out. But you can also, and this is just an alternative, you can sew this top bit first. It just means that the pocket will kind of gape open more, but you can also probably fit more in it. So you can do this later, or you can do it now. I'm gonna do it now just for something different. So now we just need to start sewing all of the pleats except the center one. So I'm gonna start on the one that's got more, and I'm gonna start on this one. So I'm gonna fold it. Now you wanna make sure that the fabric's right side up. That is important. And then I'm just gonna stitch really close to the edge. So I say 1/8 of an inch, but basically as close as you can get to that edge, that's where you wanna be. So I'm gonna stitch and back stitch. Then I'm gonna grab this one, fold it towards the back, stitch and back stitch along that edge, stitch and back stitch. Then, making sure that you don't stitch that one again, we're going to grab this other center one. I always like to stitch from the open bottom to the top. Again, personal preference, it's just what I have discovered I like best. Chop this one off. Again, fold it to the back, stitch and back stitch, stitch up that line. So this one's done, but we still have some more on here. So what we're eventually going to do is fold that into the center like so, and then it's an expanding pocket. Let's grab this edge, fold it. Where's my line? There's my line. Whatever you're marking it with, just make sure you can see your line. It's fairly important. So here's where we're going to waste a little bit of thread. Chop that off and then come and do this side. If you're making multiple of these, production sewing is your friend. You'll have less tails. Stitch, back stitch, up we go. Stitch, but I just ran out of thread. I did not win bobbin roulette today, but that's all right. I have another one that I prepared right before I started recording because I knew that my little leftover bobbin wouldn't be enough. People always wonder how I can do that. The official answer is practice, and also you can kind of feel it. So I'm just going to start back a little bit, stitch, back stitch, stitch, back stitch. It was not even a full inch. That's all right. You can barely tell. The thread blends in, so you can barely tell. It'll be fine. All right. We are going to grab our next pocket. And then we're going to draw the lines that we need to fold this over as well. So from the edge, draw my line, and the other edge, edge. That should be all the lines I have to draw. Oh, I could have chain sewed this with the other one. Oh well, next time. So I'm going to fold it on that crease. Oh wait, no, before I do that, before I sew it, I might put my binding on. Feels like a good idea. Fold it, crease it. The crease does help. You can also iron it in half. Feels excessive, but it would work. I actually don't know if I'm going to have enough red to go around the whole thing yet. I may have to get black. Doesn't matter if it's got multiple colours. A, this is mine for the gardening, and B, sometimes it looks cool with multiple colours. I did the one in the pattern. Oh no, maybe I did all blue on that. Alright, that'll do. So along the top edge, I'm just going to fold it over. Now you can clip this in place if you want to. Stitch and back stitch. I'm just going to hold it in place, stitch it down, readjust, hold it in place, stitch it down. Because I've already put that crease, it just sits in the crease. Crisis averted, see? Done. Now I'm going to stitch those side lines. It just would have been more tricky to do it in the reverse order. Stitch, back stitch. We're going to always back stitch everything because we do not want it coming apart. The reason we put these in is to make the slip pocket fit more than just like flat pieces of paper. When I originally made these way back, this didn't have these little tab bits that I'm doing now, so it doesn't fit a lot. Trim off those tails. So this, you want to fold these out. This is now where your pockets are going to live. So all the raw edges are going to touch down the bottom. This, I'm going to do this along the bottom. I'm going to hold these together in place like this. Because this is how skinny the actual pocket's going to be. Even though we started off with the same size, this becomes smaller, and I'm going to put a clip on the top. Now normally I would have stitched across there. That's what I do in the pattern, but again, we're just doing something different. This is now the size of the skinny pocket. So it's going to just go next to it like this. Now you can configure them however you want. You can put this one on the left or the right. It doesn't matter. What we do need to do though is, again with the Chaco pen, line them up where we want them, and you want the little flat bits that we sewed tucked underneath on the pockets, but out on the piece we're putting them on, because otherwise you'll sew these down. I have done it several times. I know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to line them up so that they're touching here and they've got about the same space each side, which is to there. So I'm now going to just trace each side of the pocket with the flaps tucked under. And this is where we're going to sew the flaps too. Same with this one. So I'm going to line that up, make sure these are touching so it's flat. And then, like that. Ta-da! So now I've got the marks where the pockets sit. Doesn't matter which one you start with. Actually, I personally prefer to start on this side, but it doesn't really matter. So I'm gonna pull that flap out, make sure this flaps out so that we're not gonna stitch it, because if it's under, you will sew it down, and then you have to unpick it. I hate unpicking. Sometimes it's a necessary evil. Still doesn't mean I enjoy it. Alright, so we line that pocket edge up. Stitch, back stitch, stitch, back stitch. Reinforces it. We still have to put more stuff on the bottom, that's why I'm not super worried about that. Then we're going to grab this flap and we're going to lift the pocket up, and it's not going to be sitting flat. It's going to lift up. That's totally fine. That is the plan. Stitch, back stitch. Line it up. We're stitching 1/8 of an inch from the edge, or as close as you feel comfortable doing. Next one, line it up. So there shouldn't be a gap between the two pockets. The point was not to make this huge, it was to make it super functional. You could create a gap if you wanted to, but you would have to go and adjust some sizings in places. And then this one, again, make sure the flap is out. And then line this up, and I'm always going bottom to top so that the bottoms line up. Line it up along there. Stitch, back stitch, stitch, back stitch. Do that as much as you like. Take that clip off. And then I'm just going to stitch along the bottom. So I'm going to take this fold and fold it on top of the one we just stitched down. I'm just going to tack this down, and we're going to do the same to the other end. So the idea is that little flap that we've created is going to sit on itself to be flat, but it's going to give us the extra space we're going to need. Also, make sure that the flap on your back piece is pulled out when you do this, or again, you're going to have to unpick. So now the bottom is flat. Look at that. Beautiful. And the top now has all this space so that I can put things in the pockets. Trim off the tails. Okay, we're going to take our back piece. I used a thicker, just plain waterproof canvas of back because I was going with a bunch of colours. Before we put this on though, we need to put the binding at the top. So again, with the fold it and press it in half. Like that. And then I'll just get another colour to go around the edge. We're going to tuck it under, stitch, back stitch, always with the back stitch. Very rarely do we not back stitch. That's not enough to go the whole, no. We missed by like a little bit, but it's not enough to go all the way around. We missed by about 10 centimeters. Trim the tails. And then I'm going to take this and just stitch the side to the side. We're just going to tack it down. Like that. And then we're going to do the opposite side because we want to line these up like we were just doing with our pockets. Stitch, back stitch. Trim, trim, like that. Now we're going to fold over those bits onto itself. Like that. Should have backstitched, but I didn't, and that's okay. And then we just need to put the binding. I need to go find some. So I have this actual strapping. It is not the most ideal thing. It is quite thick, but it will work for today's purposes because I am not waiting 2 weeks to go get more. So I'm just going to melt the end with my thread zapper so that it doesn't fray. Nobody wants it to fray. That's not fun for anyone. And then we're just going to take it. Now it's got, I don't know if you can see in the light, but it's got kind of lines going through it, which makes it much easier to find halfway. Love that for me. And then I'm just going to clip it on. So I'm going to fold it in half and clip it and work all the way around. So I'm making sure that that extra flap is out of the way until we get to the bottom. Now the bottom is a little, this is the trickiest bit that I'm doing right now, because when we get to here, we're going to have to get some of this in the corner. But we just get as close as we can without doing it before we clip that final corner. So again, I'm going to hold it, flatten it out, and squish it over. This stuff's very thick. It's not the most ideal thing to be making binding with, but it will work. So I'm not super worried. I'm just going to add an extra clip for safety measures. So again, we're going to fold it in half, clip it down. I'm using more clips on this than I would on normal binding because it's thicker, which means it's going to fight me more. So I'm just working my way along the bottom. And then again, when we get to the corner, we're going to pull it over like that and clip it down. And then we're going to pull this out from there so that we're only getting that bottom little bit. Otherwise your pocket won't open up to its full gloriousness. And then I'm going to cut it there, melt it with my thread zapper. You can also melt it with a lighter. I just don't have one here. Mine is inside to light a candle. It's all clipped down. So now we're just going to start at the top stitch. Now I'm going to go slowly because this is quite thick. It won't be a bad thing. It will actually just make it stronger. Now if you plan on being rough with yours, you might want to do a second lot of stitching. I plan on it because it's going to have garden tools in it for me. So we're going to go all the way around. You can see I'm going nice and slowly. Slowly for me at least. That is more to do with I don't want to break a needle than this is tricky to sew. It's just a straight line. It's not tricky, but again, I'm worried about snapping a needle. Again, pull this little flat bit out of the way. Stitch up. Now you could technically stop there. This is fairly strong thread, but I have had someone that managed to break through it. So we're going to go and do another line basically down the center of the binding. This one's a bit easier because there's not as much stuff in the way. Ooh, I heard that. Don't be naughty. This is just an added layer of protection to make sure you don't break it. It's not an absolute necessity. It's not in the pattern, but you can do it. Especially because I'm using such thick binding on this. I just thought it would be useful for me. Trim off those tails. And so now you've got your two pockets, your little front one, the back one, and then this is what the back looks like. So now all we have to do is add it to our belt. So you want to put it on the side that this part is not, and you need to decide if you want it on your right or your left. I think I'm going to put it on the left. So I'm going to hold it so that this is the top on the side where our X is, and I'm just going to line that up right next to the X. You don't want it so close to the buckle that it's going to drive you nuts. You want it close though. I'm going to use clips to clip this onto the belt. Like that. And then making sure that the belt part's out of the way, we're going to lift up this back, and I'm just going to come in and stitch right next to my binding. Stitch and back stitch. Moving along. Back stitch. I'm also going to stitch down the edge of the binding on the outside. We're also going to back stitch. That's going to hold it so it doesn't gape at the sides. And then same with the other side as well. You can start top or bottom for this, whatever makes you more comfortable, just line it up. So that's fairly stable. If you want to keep going with your stability, just, I don't know what you plan on putting on this thing. I'm only going to put some gardening stuff. But what you can do is come under and stitch at the bottom of the belt as well. You're going to have to kind of feel for that. It's a bit of a guessing game. Don't be mad at me, not my fault. You could also probably do it from the other side. If you've got a cylinder arm, you could definitely do it from the other side. I'm just going to stitch and back stitch. And that is a very, very secure belt. I have gone overboard a little bit, but it will not be breaking for at least a year, I should think. And there we go. All done. You can iron these flat if you want to make it presentable. Like if you're going to do a market, iron all of these things so that they're nice and flat and it'll look much, much more professional. Like that. But I'm going to use mine today, so I'm really not worried about that. But yeah, so you've got your 4 pockets. This one should be good for seedlings, I'm hoping. That's the plan, at least. And then I can put my secateurs and my trowel and my gloves and everything. Other things you can add to this, you can add a grommet. So you could put one here on the belt and then hang your gloves from it with a carabiner or a clip or something. You could also put it here so that you clip it on and then tuck it into the back pocket. Many, many add-ons. But that is complete. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!